Coming up today, dozens of people have been killed after another powerful 7.3 magnitude earthquake strikes Nepal, just weeks after a devastating earthquake killed thousands in the country. President Park Geun-hye raises the alarm over North Korea's development of a submarine-launched ballistic missile, calling it a serious challenge that undermines stability on the Korean peninsula. Plus, the United States and Russia hold their first high-level talks since the start of the Ukraine crisis. Both sides say the discussions went well. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, May 13th here in Seoul. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the latest natural disaster to hit Nepal. A country was slammed by yet another powerful earthquake on Tuesday, less than 3 weeks after it was devastated by the first 7.8 magnitude tremor that killed more than 8,000 people. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the second earthquake, measured at a magnitude of 7.3, struck near Mount Everest early Tuesday local time and was followed by two separate aftershocks. Authorities say the death toll has reached at least 50, while another 1,200 have been injured. This as the country has been desperately trying to recover and rebuild ahead of the monsoon season, which starts next month. Meanwhile, a U.S. military helicopter sent to support relief efforts in Nepal has gone missing, with as many as 8 people believed to be on board. The Korean government says it will send an emergency response team to Nepal later today. Back here in Korea, and tensions continue to mount over North Korea's recent experimental firing of a submarine-launched ballistic missile. In a clear indication of how seriously South Korea is taking the development, the Presidential Office of Cheongwade convened its first emergency meeting in a year on Tuesday. Na Hyung-kyung reports.
North Korea test-firing a submarine-launched ballistic missile poses a serious challenge to East Asia's stability. Those are the words of President Park Geun-hye at an emergency meeting on Tuesday with members of her cabinet, including Defense Minister Han Min-gu.
As for the North's recent threat to strike our vessels in the West Sea, the president has ordered the military to be ready at all times and sternly strike back should Pyongyang attack.
Meanwhile, Seoul's defense ministry also reassured that SLBM threats could be handled.
The South Korean military is capable of targeting and destroying ballistic missiles launched from North Korean submarines in advance.
An unnamed defense ministry official said Tuesday, though, that the military is planning on expanding its anti-submarine warfare capability. The official said the military will improve its underwater listening posts, which help detect and track submarines, and enhance its sonar technology. Responding to calls by some experts to work more closely with its allies, the official also hinted at a possible three-way meeting between the defense chiefs of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. That meeting will likely take place at an annual defense dialogue in Singapore later this month. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
And as a follow-up to that report, international experts are actually raising doubts over North Korea's recent claim that it tested a submarine-launched ballistic missile. A top U.S. expert on North Korea says he believes Pyongyang conducted the test from a submerged barge, not from a submarine. Joseph Bermudez shared his assessment during a discussion hosted by the website 38 North in Washington on Tuesday, citing satellite imagery taken a day after the claimed missile test, which showed a submarine docked next to a barge. Now, Bermudez said he seriously doubted whether North Korea would be able to test an SLBM from a submarine that was only launched last October, adding that the regime lacks the technology at the moment. The expert said he suspected the photos of the test launch released by the North were photoshopped or manipulated in some way in order to exaggerate progress in its missile development. South Korea's rival political parties continue to wrangle over reforms to the country's pension system. But on Tuesday, Parliament finally made some headway, passing 3 bills and adopting 2 resolutions involving Japan. Ji Myung-gil reports.
Lawmakers passed 3 economy-related bills at the National Assembly on Tuesday afternoon. The biggest issue on the table was a bill to revise the tax code, which drew a strong backlash from taxpayers when it was adopted last year, because many workers had to pay more in tax instead of getting refunds. The law revision will give salaried workers a larger tax refund than they would have gotten with the current law. It is expected to benefit more than 6 million workers, and companies will file for the refund for their workers and include it in their salaries for May. The total amount to be refunded is expected to be more than $400 million. One of the other 2 bills passed Tuesday allows local governments to issue bonds to finance free childcare programs. The other bill seeks to protect commercial building tenants. Lawmakers will vote on another 60 livelihood bills at another session at the end of the month. Lawmakers also adopted 2 resolutions denouncing Japan. The first condemns Japan for trying to list coal mines, shipyards, and other industrial facilities as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The list of facilities includes 7 sites where Koreans were forced into labor during World War II. The second resolution denounces Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for failing to issue an apology for Japan's wartime sex slavery program during his address to the U.S. Congress last month. Abe made no direct mention in the speech of Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean, Chinese, and other Asian women, foregoing a chance to resolve a long-standing historical issue with Japan's neighbors. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
And President Park Geun-hye on Tuesday urged lawmakers to quickly pass the bill to reform Korea's public employee pension system, saying it's the most urgent task at hand. Our Choi Yu-sun reports.
At Tuesday's cabinet meeting, President Park called on the country's main rival parties to approve a proposal to reform the public employee pension system to avoid leaving future generations with a pile of debt. She compared the deficit-ridden system to a time bomb that will eventually explode and wreak havoc on taxpayers if the reforms are not carried out, which will increase the financial burden on the public.
우리나라 미래는 어떻게 될 거며 또 우리 재정은 어쩔 건가 이런 거에 대해서 심각하게 생각을 해야 한다고 봅니다. 이것만 생각하면 한숨이 나와요.
She also reiterated her opposition to linking a plan to reform the National Pension Fund to the public servant pension reforms, saying more time is needed to discuss the economic and social effects of increasing the national pension coverage to 50% of a subscriber's average income. The ruling and opposition parties continue to lock horns over this issue. In fact, the president took direct aim at the opposition's demand to include the national pension increase in the reform bill. While the opposition suggests a different calculation, the presidential office says raising the coverage to 50% of a person's average income will lead to additional taxes in the amount of $1.5 trillion.
빚을 줄이는 노력을 외면하면서 국민한테 세금을 거두려고 하는 것은 너무나 염치가 없는 일입니다.
It was a rare show of frustration from the president, who was urged swift passage of reforms to the public pension system. It's likely that she will not try to turn public sentiment away from the main opposition party's push to link the national pension coverage to the reforms by highlighting the potential strain on state finances and the increased taxes on the public. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Former Prime Minister Wankoo will appear before prosecutors on Thursday over allegations he took kickbacks from a recently deceased businessman. Prosecutors say Lee complied with their summons without much resistance. The former Prime Minister is accused of taking around $27,000 in illegal campaign funds from the late Song Wan-jong, who was the CEO of Gyeongnam Enterprises, this back in 2013. The late businessman left behind a list with the names of 8 politicians who he alleges took bribes from him. The former Prime Minister is the second official on the list to be questioned, following Gyeongsang Namdo Province Governor Hong Jun-pyo. The buds of an economic recovery in Korea may be sprouting, with some key indicators like consumption and output picking up last month. While this bodes well in the short term, lingering external risks refuse to go away. Kim Min-ji has the details.
The signals are weak, but showing signs of recovery. That's the Finance Ministry's diagnosis of the Korean economy. In its monthly Green Book report released on Tuesday, the ministry said the pace of increase in employment has slowed and consumer prices are down due to low global oil prices, but overall major economic indicators such as industrial output and consumption are steadily improving. The report shows private consumption rose 0.6% in the first quarter of this year from the previous quarter, while it rose 1.5% from a year earlier. Department store sales edged up 1.5% in April from a year ago, while credit card transactions jumped over 15%. Domestically produced vehicles saw a nearly 3% rise in sales last month from a year ago, while gasoline sales rose around 9%. Industrial output went up nearly 2% in March from the previous year.
To some extent, the gains can be attributed to a base effect from last April's ferry disaster. But 3 key rate cuts since last August and government stimulus measures are also supporting the slow-paced recovery that will likely continue into the second quarter.
However, the expert also pointed to the weak Japanese currency and delays in the recovery of major economies as external factors that could weigh on the economy moving forward. Those factors have already lowered the competitiveness of Korea's exports, once the pillars of the economy, and data shows that exports fell more than 8% in April from a year ago. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's overseas direct investment rose 5.2% from the previous year during the first quarter. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance said Tuesday that Korean companies invested over $7.7 billion abroad during the first 3 months of the year. A large chunk of the investment was made in the United States, followed by Asia and South America. By industry, retail and wholesale investments jumped more than threefold on year, with more Korean businesses investing in the US and Singapore. A ministry official says Korea's overseas direct investment is expected to increase this year as the global economy regains its growth momentum. Korean DRAM makers hit another record high in the global DRAM market. Market researcher DRAM Exchange said Tuesday the combined global market share of Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix in the first quarter totaled 71.7%, rising 1.3 percentage points from the previous quarter. DRAM Exchange predicts the Korean players' global market dominance will continue as they have been investing heavily in their technology and facilities. Meanwhile, the total revenue of the global DRAM market in the first quarter was $12 billion, dropping 7.5% from the previous quarter. The frosty ties between the United States and Russia could be thawing as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry met Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday for the first time since the Ukraine crisis sent relations tumbling to new lows. Prior to that meeting, Kerry held more than 4 hours of talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov at a hotel in the Black Sea resort of Sochi. Writing on his Twitter feed, Kerry said he had frank discussions with Lavrov and Putin on key issues including the Iran nuclear talks, the conflict in Syria and the situation in Ukraine. A spokesman for President Putin called the meeting a positive step and said the Russian leader wanted extensive talks in the near future. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has stuck by her country's arms sales to Israel, saying Germany has a special obligation to help protect the Jewish state, given that millions of Jews were killed by the Nazis during World War II. Meeting with Israel's President Reuven Rivlin in Berlin on Tuesday, Merkel said Germany sells weapons to Israel because the country should be allowed to defend itself and is often attacked. Her remarks come as Israel announced plans this week to buy 4 German-built warships to protect its offshore gas fields. The Israeli president is on a 3-day visit to Germany to mark 50 years of Israel-German relations. Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a great day and thank you for watching. And we do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye.